Hey, Will, welcome back. We took a break last week for Thanksgiving, and here this week, not sure if we were going to be able to film because you've been a little under the weather. How you feeling, man?
Um, Kind of like death, but who cares really? You take some over the counters and then you're just joyous and like nothing's ever wrong, you know?
All right. Well, feel free to pop a Ricola if the spirit moves.
I may need
And
to pop one. It really depends though, because sometimes certain flavors of the Ricola, they end up like causing my throat to actually like cough more, and it depends. Like some of them I feel like are like designed so that you have to go and buy more. So I don't know. I'm gonna try these over there. They're berrylicious, and I just feel like it's a scam already. But we'll see.
yes, absolutely. Candy flavors, total scam. And yes, but Thanksgiving was last week, and
Yes.
hopefully, I think you had kind of some sick in your household, but hopefully you at least ate some good food. I know I ate a tremendous amount of good food. I'm still full. It's a week
Nice.
later.
Is it possible
Yeah,
that a
but
turkey can have pink eye, like after it's
a
dead?
turkey. Well, I think the heads are removed actually
Oh, right.
before
So there's
you
no
serve
eyes
them.
actually in the
Generally,
meal. All right. So
you know,
I couldn't have gotten it. I thought it was the turkey, but I guess it was something else.
maybe it was bird flu. Yeah, maybe so. Well, at any rate, so we were not definitely not hungry. I'm still not hungry, which is my segue, awkward though it might be, into the topic of our podcast today. Hunger Games is a movie that falls into this subgenre of psychological thriller that I'm going to put Squid Game, right? I'm going to put the Running Man remake and the original that came out back when I was in high school with Arnold. Yeah, and also The Long Walk, which I have not seen myself, but I've heard reports from some folks who did. Extremely bleak. And yeah, so what is this subgenre? We're calling it the win or die trying subgenre of movies. And it falls under this psychological kind of thriller, sort of like horror. And what do these movies have in common? Why are they proliferating? Why are shows like Squid Game so popular when so many people are dying left and right? What is the story behind these stories? So that's what we're going to unpack today. I understand you're a Squid Game guy. You've watched Squid Game, yes?
Yes, I have seen it actually twice. I watched it. Yeah,
Okay.
and I watched it. You have to watch it in the Korean language, by the way. You can't do the dub, the English dub, because it just changes the whole. It's yeah, not as good.
All right. Good note. Good note there. I have watched The Hunger Games. It came out when I had teenage girls, and they're still one of them's a teenager still, but and so Katniss Everdeen was the hero, and yet these movies, when you really think about it, they're extremely bleak and dark. With in the Hunger Games, for example, teenagers being kidnapped from their homes against their will, being forced into a fight to the death, hand-to-hand combat with other teenagers, and we're all like, "Yeah, pass the popcorn." Well, okay, so what is drawing us into these stories, and what is it saying about us as a culture? I want us to look at this today. So, first, let's look at why these movies are a little bit different from the standard horror genre, the standard thriller. And so, what I want to say here is, well, typically with horror, you have a bad guy, or you have a monster, you have some sort of demonic thing, that wants to kill people, and typically, the characters are trying to run away, right, and try to stay safe. Well, as in these movies, it's kind of flipped. The participants may be kidnapped in the case of Running Man, but they're actually willingly participating in killing each other. Why? Well, because there's an incentive. They're in a game. Hunger Games, Squid Game. So they're fighting not just for their lives, but they're fighting to be victorious. And the enemy is not a monster, but it's the system. The system, whether it's the cultural elite in Hunger Games or in The Long Walk, the evil general, I think it is, who's got these teenage boys doing this long walk, or what's the system in the Squid Game? Well,
Well, so I mean, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's different levels. So yes, obviously there's the higher class that's overseeing a lot of things without spoiling too much, right? But also
okay.
Squid Games, there's another thing to add there, but there is that aspect of the other flip side of the human will on the bad side.
Mm.
That's the enemy in that one
Mhm.
big time. Not necessarily
Okay.
just the system. It's the flip side of the human will and just how far that'll go on the flip side of the coin.
Yes.
But yes, there is a system
Yes.
involved, though. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good. And that's a good segue too, because the enemy is not just the system, but it's, are you, the protagonist, or the characters in this story, gonna conform by kind of going dark, right? You have to go dark in order to survive, to make an alliance, to betray people, to how does it work if there can only be one survivor, like in Hunger Games? The system is rigged against partnership and against alliance. Of course, we know Katniss outwits the system, but before we get to that, these bleak movies are definitely tapping into something, a bleakness or a nihilism, like a kind of a everything is meaningless, life is meaningless. May as well fight to survive. A little before we hopped on, you were talking about some memories that you have living in New York when the COVID pandemic, like, like really erupted. It was much worse where you guys live in New York than it was for us living in the South, where there's lots of space between people. But talk a little bit about that, what you were sharing just a minute ago.
Yeah. Well, that idea, the flip side of the human will, I'll call it. I did feel this sense of every man for himself. When that pandemic hit. Of course, people had, care and concern to a general sense, but just feel like the general attitude of, of the general person, I suppose, because I don't want to say everybody was like this, but it just felt like this sense of, all right, well, I don't care about you. I mean, you stay away from me. It's my family and I'm getting this and I'm getting that, like I've heard stories in the past about people trampling each other in the 80s over Cabbage Patch Kids, in the store at Christmas time and stuff, and actually killing people over, ridiculous things, right? But now you talk about a virus that, is infecting, it has a chance of killing people. And even in that, I just remember just the way the human just attitude, like towards the other, was so removed, and just like, I don't even, like, I remember the Costco lines with my mom. I still have videos of it, just like wrapped around, but just the people trying to get in, trying to get stuff, people taking too much, people stealing food. And of course, there's this idea of like, how far will you go? When it comes to, I think there's a line in The Office where Andy was like, would you steal food to feed your family? Boom, like a philosophical drop. And it's true, because, there is a certain like philosophical aspect to that. But I remember, and I think we're still recovering from this as a society. Like I said before, I think we still see it. I still see a new selfishness that was watered and kind of like grew during that pandemic that I still see on the roads now. I still see it when people are in public, even just handling social situations with one another. I just see there's just this increased rage, and maybe there always was this kind of like battle, and I don't want to be, ignorant to that, but it's definitely amplified, and it's in a new way
Yeah.
that I saw kind of like burst from that,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're onto something. I don't want us to go too dark, but I do think that something has shifted in our culture, and I think the pandemic was instrumental. I don't think it was the only thing. I think political polarization has played a huge role as well. But there's a level of individualism that's become kind of pathological, where we're like, I'm desperate for me and mine, and to get mine. And if you have to get hurt in order for me to get there. Now, as you said, not everybody, and certainly there are plenty of kind and compassionate people, but it takes energy. It takes the power of the will to push through that individualism and to make sacrifices for other people. And to come back to our topic and to these movies, we do see that you do see that in these movies in different ways. So on the one hand, we understand that, okay, so this win or die trying genre, it's distinct from traditional horror in that the monster is the system. There's a game aspect, right? So hey, it's fun, right? Well, yeah, it's fun for the people watching, which is obviously horrifying, right? That people enjoying these battles to the death, and seeing people violently killed. It's sometimes, kids, teenagers. And then this second theme is this philosophy of it's either me or you, right? One of us is going to die. And so it's not going to be me. Therefore, I'm going to turn on you. So that desperation leads to kind of the surrender of the moral compass, where I'm no longer, survival, yes, but am I still human at the end of the story when, I kept my life, but I lost my soul, so to speak. So I think you're right. I think that this is a reflection really now. Some of these stories, by the way, are old. So Running Man and The Long Walk, both written by Stephen King years and years ago. Him, critiquing the system with his particular take on story and horror. The Squid Game, you mentioned that there's a system, but that the people who are fighting in Squid Game are fighting for economic reasons, right? Because not only do you live, but you get a reward, right? So how does that work, like in Squid Game, where you're looking for financial freedom? Is that right?
You're looking for financial freedom, but then you realize that, these games are actually eliminating people. Like, you don't go home, like you die. So, and then there's only really going to be one winner is the issue.
Yeah.
There's 456, I believe, players in the beginning. So once you start realizing, I think the first game wiped out 200. And every time there was more people wiped out, there was more money in the chest to win. And people actually had the choice to leave after the first day. They were brought back to their homes. They were dropped off, or they could leave if they wanted. Sorry, they took a vote. So this system was actually like trying to be nice to them. I'm kind of remembering this now. It was being nice to them by giving them the option to leave. And then they all voted on it. And it was like kind of split, but it was like one vote that broke it. So then they were able to leave. But then they ended up coming back because they needed the money, because they went to their lives and they're like, I don't want to be part of this. Actually, my life sucks. So then they went back. Yeah. But it was insane, actually. Like, it was just nuts that the fact that they actually got out of that situation where, oh my gosh, I almost died. And they're like, wait a minute, my life isn't worth living, so might as well just put it on the line. And when you turn things into a game like that, you almost make it not real. And I think that's kind of the issue with, and you're making the sanctity of life kind of like not a real thing and more of just a game. And like, because like you said, the nihilism of just like, what's the point? The ultra rich class, like you're saying, especially in Hunger Games, like they already have so much that the only thing that's going to give them any kind of kick is to be betting on or watching people fight to the death. And honestly, we even see this like in our culture now, that you can bet on anything now. If you're scrolling Instagram, have you ever seen the ads where you can bet, or people have been betting on like who's going to be elected? People are betting on like these little things, even just these little decisions, political. So now people are like betting on this, but they're not as a game, but like they're not even looking at who the candidates are. It's more about, I'm just betting my money on who's going to win. So it's kind of like a similar thing where it's like, oh, it's just a game. So if that guy wins, oh yeah, I don't care that guy's going to totally destroy that state. I won money though, because he won. It's like kind of a weird reflection, isn't it?
It is. And, the theme here, I think that threads through this is just how cheap life becomes once there's some financial gain, like you mentioned, right? Well, I'd rather trade my life for a chance at financial freedom than continue to live the life that I have right now. In Hunger Games, it's, all the players are there against their will. they're selected in a lottery. But it does beg the question, right? How much is a life worth? How much is your life worth? And as a culture, we have for sure, and we see this all in all kinds of ways, where we're with racism and xenophobia, fear people. It's not even fear, but it's just the utter devaluing of human life. I think it was last week that our president called Somalis living in Minnesota garbage. So I think, that kind of language and that kind of way of talking about people is a reflection of how we have surrendered our values when it comes to what a human life is worth. And, I'm not trying to be political. I'm just trying to say, look, if people are talking like this, we ought to call it out. So,
Right, yeah. I mean, it's only one example of probably millions at this point of people, just like shelling out like that. Even Facebook, or people typing, just to hit massive crowds of people, or even just individual others. The love thy neighbor as thyself command from Jesus is just completely out the window. It's almost like anti-behavior.
Yeah. So I'm looking over here at my notes. I don't want us to stay too long in the dark and the horrible side. I do want us to see that while these stories are a reflection of shifting values and really eroding values, the eroding of the value that we place on human life, in the stories are embedded, because these authors are pointing this out, but then they also want to say, they want to show us that there are beautiful signs that not everybody is going that way. And so, as I think about our listeners now, and what I want to encourage our listeners to take away from this, it's that the worldview that we have, it should be pushing back on, let's say, the erosion of key values like the value of human life. We should be pushing back on that. We should be resisting that gravitational pull. And so we want to call out then these hopeful signs in, let's say, in the movie Hunger Games, where Katniss is the hero, she's the protagonist, and we see her time and again not taking just this surrender her moral values, but she's working to try to preserve life. So obviously it's kind of an ill-fated enterprise, but there's the little girl that she tries to save, and then obviously she makes a deal at the end so that there can be two Hunger Games winners at the end. And so we see sacrifice over self-preservation. We see compassion show up at various points. We see these signs of kindness, which may be few and far between. And then of course there's the jaded sponsor and I can't remember his name, but the jaded sponsor in Hunger Games, who finally kind of comes around, and he goes and he raises money to help Katniss, survive. And so when we see those things, we cheer that on. That's a sign that, hey, there's still a heart beating in our chest that says it is better. It is better to preserve life. It is better to be compassionate and to be kind. And the reason we cheer that on is because those values are still at work in our own hearts.
Yeah, especially when you see the value that especially God places on human life and has instilled within human life from the creation of the beginning. When you are in touch with that, whether it's through another person right in front of you or the heroes in these stories like sparing a life, it's always going to have more value and more joy in that. Because in these stories, some of them, like a Squid Game, for example, touches upon this, where the winner of all the money didn't want it at the end, didn't spend any of it because it didn't bring him any joy. And there's places where joy to be found. So yes, you might be able to trade this meaningless human life for whatever else. And then all of a sudden you realize that that's not where true joy is found. It's found in a connection, and it's there because there's a soul, there's a created soul. It's not just like organs and nothing. And there's heroes, like you said, in our society that are pushing, that are like little lights within to reinstill value, you know,
Right.
within human life.
Well, and
Even on social media,
that,
these people that raise, I just saw this GoFundMe for this dude that couldn't retire as a veteran because he lost his
boy.
pension, and this
Yeah.
guy started a GoFundMe for the guy, and a bunch of people came together and raised $2 million for this guy, like out of nothing, out of nothing. So like you said, there is still a beating heart, and there is like this equal, not an equal and opposite reaction, but kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like, I know for one that comes to mind, honestly, is Soundview Pregnancy Center that my wife did some work with in the past too. That gives mothers another option. The
Yeah.
other, mother, instills another version of like, hey, no, this is valuable. Let's stay here. Like, let me show you value in this way. Let me show you that life is
Right.
valuable in this way. Let me not give you the way out, whatever,
No, that's absolutely right. And why we started this podcast from the beginning was to call attention to the movies and the stories that we enjoy, but the stories behind it and the values behind the stories, and why do we cheer when the hero sacrifices themselves, for the weak, or for the vulnerable, or for a child, let's say. Why do we cheer? Why wouldn't we cheer at just the bald exercise of individuality, right? Greed is good, and I'm just going to do whatever I want. Why do we, why do we like why does that revolt us when somebody does that? It is because there are these values that are embedded in us, and they're embedded by our Creator, who, we understand that we are created in the image of God. And consider that God himself, when he became human, person of Jesus, it was so that Jesus could lay down his life in this ultimate sacrifice for even those who were opposed to him. So you've got this group of people, we call them sinners, who are all doing life for themselves. And Jesus says, hey, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he lays down his life for even the people who were taking his life. So why is that such a powerful message? It is because the love that we see reflected in Christ and in the love of God, in Christ's death for sinners, it draws that echo out from us, and we say, yes, it is better to give than to receive. Not only do we receive more joy, but it's a reflection of who God is. And so I think, where I would kind of want us to highlight this movie, and the theme that comes out of these movies are, our own emotional reactions that we feel when we see something like that, and there's this thrill that takes place inside of us, and we're like, yes, I'm so glad that the system didn't win, or that really selfish individualist person didn't win, or that the main character didn't turn to the dark side, and kill all the, why does it offend us so much that Anakin, turns to the dark side, but then we get so excited when he turns back? It is because those values are embedded in our souls. And
that's right. It's woven within our very being. It's crying out
right.
to point back to why we love the hero story and where it all came from. And it also reflects on what God loves and what God finds, triumphant and beautiful. That just should just show you a little bit about him, like what he loves and finds important and values too. And it's awesome. Right. It's heroic, and it's why we love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all these things. And, as far as Lord of the Rings, maybe C.S. Lewis, a couple of these people took quite a few tips from the gospel. So anyway.
Oh yeah.
That's for another one.
So as we round out, yep, we're gonna actually do Tolkien in our next episode. But as we round this one out, I want to encourage the viewer, like if you watch a movie like The Long Walk and you walk away just going, walk away, you walk away, you're walking to your car and you're going, oh, I just feel so heavy. I just feel so like, I mean, there was good parts of the movie but it just, there's a reason for that. And so what we're doing here on this podcast is we're encouraging you to look at that story at that deeper level and look at how it's playing out, calling up an emotional reaction in you and playing out in your own life. And then to invest yourself in cultivating the values that value life and that affirm life in all of its expressions. So it is a joy as always, and Will, I appreciate you, sticking it out with just a Ricola to help you,
No
man.
problem.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so but we are going to move on to another episode here in a little bit, but we hope we get a like out of you if you would just slap that like button, subscribe, and check us out on Patreon at The Collective, where we're also posting videos for another project we're working on, which is the Care Institute. And so we'd love to see you over there. But thanks for joining us for this episode of The Stories We Live By, and we'll see you next time.